I'll introduce myself first. My name's Andrew. I'm the curator here at the Cartoon Art Museum. And April Whitney from Chronicle Books reached out to me, as she did about 10 years ago, and she said, hey, Jeff Brown's got a new book and you need to check it out, and I think it would be a really great exhibition. And she did the same thing again. Earlier this year, she said, hey, we've got Thor and Loki coming out. I think it will be a really fun exhibition for the museum, and it is. You've all seen it. You can attest to that. So I'm really excited. And then she said, let's bring Jeff out and we can have a fun little event. And I said, I'm down with that. And so I'm glad you could all make it out here tonight. And we're going to do a little Q&A. I want you to think of your own audience questions. So we're going to make this as painless as possible. Yeah. For Jeff, he's got an early morning flight, so we don't want to exhaust him too much. But let's first give him a round of applause. Thank you. Great. Hi. Thanks for coming. That's awesome. That's it. Okay, so yeah, this is such a fun book, and I was curious about your actual introduction to Thor and Loki, because everybody in the audience, I know it's a mix of some people discovered them through the movies, some people, have been going to their local comic shops forever, and a lot of people are somewhere in between, but I'm curious about.
Yeah, so I was always a Marvel guy growing up. So my main love was X-Men, but like Secret Wars, Spider-Man, Thing, West Coast Avengers, not West Coast Avengers, but with Thor, I got really into Walt Simonson's Thor run, and I just loved. One, I just liked, I thought it was interesting that he was like the writer and the artist, which was something I was like maybe vaguely familiar with, but it was kind of this outlier of way of creating comics, and so that was really interesting to me. And then also his art style is just like it was like a different kind of cartooning than a lot of like the standard Marvel comic stuff, or just comics in general. And then I just like Thor is like a fun character, and Loki was fun, and then he did like things like Frog Thor. That's where my love of Thor began, I guess.
Yeah. And, so how many of you are familiar with Frog? So yeah, if you read those comics in the 80s, that was it was a little bit controversial, it was one of the most fun stories.
It's interesting because now it's like oh, Jane Foster being Thor is like super controversial. It's like Thor can't be. We went through this in the 80s. He turned into a frog for 3 issues, so like it's not too bad.
So Walt Simonson, in addition to being into the Thor comics when he was a kid, he was a big mythology buff. And I thought it was interesting that he actually drew his own fan comics when he was a kid. So he had ideas for Thor from a very early age. And I'm curious if you drew fan comics.
I did, although they were very story-wise, they were very derivative. I I don't know that I ever actually drew any Thor stories, but it's funny because my drawings of Thor kind of evolved with Walt Simonson, where it's like eventually I was drawing Thor with a beard, he didn't have a beard early, but mostly X-Men stories, and it was usually Wolverine just getting really beat up, and then coming back to win at the end. He's his mask is torn off and he's bleeding everywhere, and then that's that.
it sounds cool, but it's actually a terrible power because you have to get beat up for that to really work.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There wasn't like a lot of depth to those that story. Like, and I think that's another reason why like one of the things that struck me about Thor was like there was like this kind of underlying narrative in Walt's comics, like the power struggles between Thor and Loki, and like the motivations and things that I mean, I guess there's things started to happen in X-Men too that like I started to pick up on as I got older. But there was like meat to the stories beyond like just, and then at the same time like you'd have a whole issue of Thor just like fighting the Midgard serpent, where it's just like 32 pages of splash pages of fighting the giant serpent dragon.
And again, like we should have Marvel Comics footnotes running across the like I don't want to derail you by shouting out issue numbers, but
the little asterisk with like C issue. I mean, I think that's like actually a really clever marketing gimmick that Marvel had, or like that comics is like C issue something. Like they like I don't know if how intentional that was, but like that really. Like one of the reasons like I started getting to back issues is like, wait, I need to like find out about this thing. So I need to go back to this issue. And then you read that issue and they're like, see this issue or see this other issue number of this comic. And so it's like really like this like subversive way of Marvel getting you to buy more comics.
Absolutely. So yeah, they'll mention like the reason Thor showed up late for this battle is because he was hanging out with the Avengers, and you really need to drop your 75 cents on that if you want to find out what's going on. Great. And so backtracking a little bit, I'd like to know, how did this book specifically come about? It's such a fun concept, little Thor and little Loki.
Yeah, I mean, so I worked with Chronicle books for years, even before Star Wars. I was doing my cat books, and here are my editors here. How did this book come about? I remember it just seemed to kind of like it's like one of those things that seemed inevitable once it happened. Like it's like. Yeah, like this was going to happen at some point. I think maybe like someone at Marvel was like, "Hey, has Jeffrey ever thought about doing something with like Marvel characters?" And of course, I have, because like I grew up with Marvel, and I did a couple Strange Tales anthology pieces. Like one was 2 pages, one was 4 pages. That's all the room I got. And so my editor Steve at Chronicle. Like started, picking my brain, like if you thought about this, like what would you do if you did Marvel? Like, and it's like, well, the Guardians of the Galaxy movie's coming out, and like the second one, and at the time, and like the Guardians of the Galaxy makes sense, or the Avengers. And it's like, well, the Avengers, like overall, I don't necessarily connect to, but I really like Thor, and then like Thor movies were coming out, and I really liked Thor Ragnarok, and the Loki TV show. I can't remember if that was already out or coming out, or maybe one episode was out. I don't remember the timing, but it just seemed like kind of natural. It's like, so like I came up with like this short list of like, I wouldn't mind doing something with this, or this, and one of them was Thor and Loki, and then thinking about it more is like, well, what would my take of Thor and Loki be? And one of the things about the Star Wars books is a lot of it draws on my own personal life in terms of family. So it's like Darth Vader is me as a dad, and Luke is my kids. And so like even when I'm doing Star Wars or Marvel, like there needs to be some kind of connection. And so I have 2 older brothers, and so started thinking about like Thor and Loki. It's like, oh yeah, like Thor and Loki, they sometimes like they're at each other's throats, and they're like, or they're like the whole tricking each other thing was like that was constant. It was like always teaming up with one or the other of my brothers against the other one, or they would team up with me, or and so that was kind of like the thing that clicked was like, oh yeah, it should, like that's like they're just two kids getting into trouble. Then so then you have to have the parents there, who are kind of like on the one hand like trying to manage the chaos, but also being like the supportive parents. And so yeah, I guess that's so it's hard to like remember exactly like how the timing and what the conversations led to it, because like once we landed on it, then it seemed like, oh yeah, this is obviously what it should be. It should be like Thor and Loki, like family mayhem.
Excellent. And so I know a lot of you have had time to walk around and check out the exhibition, but we've got your sketchbook over there. So I thought that would be a great chance to talk about the process.
Yeah.
But to get a book that is about 64 pages, how much work is?
Yeah, so I always try to I always aim for like 150. I think for Thor and Loki it was between 100 and 120, so not quite as many, but I felt like there's plenty of material there. Sometimes it's a process of just churning out ideas like that I know like are bad or that are fully formed, but I just try to hit that number. And then sometimes like those ideas that like this is clearly like not a good idea, but something with another idea clicks and then it turns into something else, or I find some aspect of that idea that's useful for another comic. And then sometimes it's like the idea comes fully formed and it's just like, this is an easy one. Like the final drawing is pretty close to what the sketch is. Yeah, so it's like come up with all those ideas, and then I work with Steve and then the editors at Marvel. We all kind of go through and like everyone kind of has their list of like, these are our favorites. And so there's usually like a chunk that's like everyone likes these, and then they might like some, and sometimes like someone likes one and I'm like, no, like I know I came up with that idea, and so it's no offense to me, but I don't like that one. And then sometimes there's one that no one else likes, and I'm like, no, I like this one. I really like this one. It makes me happy. So I might like, and it, so I might fight harder for some, and so a little bit of back and forth until we arrive at like, here's what'll make up the book. And I usually try to like, so 64 page book, but there's like title page, copyright page. So it's like about 60 ideas is what we need. And I usually try to have like another 5 to 10 that like would be approved if we needed them. And sometimes I like will draw them up just because I want to draw them up. And, but it's like good to have in the back pocket in case like once we get to the end, like especially with like working with Marvel or Disney, where like at the last minute they might decide like, no, actually like this character's been erased from history, so like you cannot include that character. So I like to have like that cushion of like a little more than we need at every stage, so that really like focus on like cutting out like ones that we don't feel strongly about.
Yeah, you never know when somebody's going to have a cosmic cube and like just
like snap characters erased from everything. Yeah.
So the sketchbook, did you carry that around with you for a couple?
Yeah. So, and a lot of times it's just like sitting there. So, like when I'm watching TV, I just like have it sitting in the room, and like as soon as something hits me, then I would like sketch it. And then I'll have like dedicated periods of time where I just like really sit down and like try to think of ideas. And then those are like the time when I'll just like be watching Thor movies and Loki, the Loki show, or just Marvel movies in general on a like, and just try to like have this background to spark things in my head, and then I'll be reading the books. So.
All right, and you're still ink on paper, which is very cool. Have you ever thought about digital art or?
I've thought about it, but not seriously. Like, it just never like makes sense to me. I think one thing I like to do everything by hand, and I'll do things repeatedly, and I don't mind it because I feel like there's something to that process about that. Like, you're just more engaged mentally with the idea in a way where, as I feel like if I did the initial sketch in digitally and then I did the next stage digitally, like there's less physical work, and somehow my mind would be less engaged. I'm not saying that would be true for everyone, and certainly doesn't apply universally, but for myself, I like to even though it's in a way more work to do things by hand, I feel like it engages thinking about the ideas that I'm trying to bring out on a deeper level.
And you teach comics, right? Do your students, are they analog or are they pushing for digital?
They're a lot more digital. Like every year it's more and more digital. And sometimes I remember one year I had a student who she'd been working only digital for the past 5 years. And I could tell something was bugging her. And I was like, for your final project, I want you to work directly in paper, no planning, just draw. Cause I know you can draw, cause she's working digitally and she's just doing it, but and so she did it, just drew, I think she used a ballpoint pen even, she's like, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten that was and I don't think she was going to abandon digitally entirely, but I think it's sometimes you lose sight of maybe the advantages of working different ways. So I still do. I'll use digital for correcting texts because sometimes I have to do that. But yeah, I think just for me personally, I just the feeling of pen on paper is way more satisfying than digital, even if it would save me time and energy in a way.
Great. And so I want everybody to think of your audience questions because we'll kick it over to the audience Q&A in just a bit here. So we've actually got some process piece over there. This is so starting on Memorial Day on the Cartoon Art Museum's eBay page, we're going to be paying tribute to Dave Stevens and the Rocketeer. So we've got a lot of our favorite artists have done original artwork celebrating that character. We're going to be auctioning it off. 20% of the proceeds will go to the Harry Cell Leukemia Foundation. So that's the disease that claimed Dave Stevens' life 15 years ago. But we're really excited. We'll be having an exhibition of that, followed by an exhibition of Dave Stevens' original artwork. So please visit our website for more information on that. But here we get to see, can you walk us through what these pieces are?
Yeah, so I wanted to do, I didn't want to do a full-on kid Rocketeer, but it is kind of that. And I wanted to do just I want to do something I don't want to say iconic because that sounds like ego or something, but something straightforward and simple, just capture Rocketeer. So for me, Rocketeer is it's just the joy of flying is the first thing that comes to mind, or that just taking off. That's always what I think about. And so the middle image was the first one I drew, and I was really happy with the Rocketeer in it, but then I started adding details and I added the background and it started to feel like it was too much. And then I signed my name on it and that was the kicker. I was that totally messed up the composition. And so I restarted. And so then the one on the left that I did next was I'll just take out of the background and just it's he's taking off, but he's also in the clouds. But that one I drew the hands and the hands were all wrong. And so I just abandoned it and then finished with the third one. I think, I don't know, I don't remember. There might be like on the backs of those, there might be other versions also.
Yes.
On one or more.
So whoever wins that auction.
Yeah.
It's on the back.
Extra. But yeah, so like that's like the thing of like redrawing it to like until it feels right. And yeah, I'm much happier with how the final one turned out. So.
Great. And are these the markers that you use to color the typical?
Yeah, this is the brand. So it's Faber-Castell Pit Artist Pens. And so I work on, so it's on, all these are drawn on Strathmore 500 series cold press illustration board. And it comes in sheets of like 20 by 30, and then I cut it down. I use Mars Statler 3H pencils. So it's like a really hard pencil, which can be bad because it's very aggressive on the paper. So you can print, like if I can see it sometimes in finished artwork where there's like pencils I've erased, but I can see the line where the pencil was in the coloring. But no one else seems to notice. No one has mentioned that to me in correspondence yet. So and so after I pencil, so the two that are just inked there, that's with the extra super fine point of these the Faber-Castell Pit Artist Pens. And then I erase really hard. So what that does is not only does it get rid of the pencil, but the ink gets faded quite a bit because if you try to color with these, sometimes right after the ink line, the black will bleed into the color. So I get the line work, and the nice thing is then I color, and I use the brush pens. And there's a tip if any of you ever use these pens. So like they're sharp. They're like a sharp point to start, and then you use them. They get all blunt. But just the brush ones, and just this brand, as far as I know, don't try this with other brands, but you can actually pull out the tip and flip it, and there's like a fresh, sharp tip on the other end. So
Even successful cartoonists want to get
yeah.
yeah.
And so and then after it's colored, then I go over with the super fine pen to finish the line work, and I'll actually adjust the lines a little bit. So there's this is a little thicker than the extra super fine. So what happens is like if the line isn't just right, I can I can either draw above or below, so I can actually change the line work slightly as I'm adding that last stage.
Okay. And again, looking at all the originals around here, and thank you for still doing hand lettering, which I love seeing that. Do you fiddle with anything in Photoshop, or is this it once it's on the page?
I mean, so yeah, like I said, sometimes just with the text stuff, I'll fiddle. And then also just in terms of scanning, I've got to adjust levels and things sometimes. Yeah, I like to have the finished piece look how it will look in the book, so that I just kind of can see it more in a more concrete way.
So you won't round somebody's ear or add extra.
No, I mean, there's maybe been a few times. I mean, there's usually I'll just redraw something if it's a big enough deal. I guess there's in my picture book that I did, I actually so there's a scene where the teacher is drawing on a chalkboard and he's writing in binary, and I messed up what it was saying. But that was a similar size to these double page spreads. So I was I'm not going to redraw this entire page. So that one I actually fixed in Photoshop, and it took me forever, just cutting and pasting it until there was a 0 instead of a 1. But yeah, I'm more inclined to just redraw something than and to like mess with in Photoshop. Or like I remember in Darth Vader and Son, there's a scene where Jar Jar Binks is like doing the ballet, and then but he was just dancing. It was like, and my editor at Disney, well, back then it was just Lucasfilm, J.W. Ritzler, was like, he should have like a tutu. And it's like, well, I can't, these pens like doesn't allow for like me to draw a tutu. So that one I actually painted a tutu on him. So if you look in that book, but like with acrylic paint. But yeah.
So yeah, so it's out of these hundreds or maybe even thousands of drawings that have been published, it's a list of about 3 that you have to look for that.
I mean, there's probably other little things here and there, but it's like I guess my litmus is if I notice it, 2, if someone else notices it, 3, if it bothers me. So sometimes there's something that like I can tell like no one's going to notice this, no one's going to care, but if it bothers me, like I need to go in and fix it and I'll redraw something. Like if it just like every time I look at it, it's just like, no, it's not right. I need to like fix it. And so that's the downside to working analog is like some like over the years with the Star Wars books, there's maybe an average of 1 or 2 pages where like I've drawn and colored the entire thing and had to redraw and recolor the entire thing. But so it's not often, but it does happen. But it's like I'm willing to pay that price, I guess.
That's fun. I'm thinking of Brent Anderson, who's a local artist. He did an X-Men graphic novel. And he said the panel that shows up the most online, the one that's most quoted, is it's got Nightcrawler, and he forgot to draw his tail. And it says it just kills him every single time. If you take it up to him at a convention, he'll draw the tail. It just bothers you that much. Okay. Do we have any audience questions? Oh, sorry. Right here.
How did you develop your style and decide that was the direction you wanted to go?
So it's kind of by accident. So like when I was growing up, I was very aware that like of different styles. So like I liked Walt Simonson. I liked all the X-Men artists. So like John Romita Jr. and Mark Silvestri when he did his little things, and especially Art Adams. So like I was aware of styles, and I was like I need to have my style. But my style was basically like, okay, now I'm in my Art Adams space. Now I'm trying to draw like Mobius. So when I went to college, I kind of drifted away from comics, except in my sketchbooks. I would still draw comic-y things, but I was like started thinking like I'm a fine artist now. I'm going to be a painter. And while I was in grad school, like painting wasn't working out, and I wasn't like happy with the work, but I was still drawing my like little cartoony stuff in my sketchbook, and it's like, oh, I just need to like draw like I was a kid. And so like my first autobiographical books, like I tried to strip down everything and like just draw like not even out of my head or heart, but just like just translate thoughts and feelings onto paper directly without thinking about style or art or like all the kind of stuff I knew. And then it just kind of developed over the years from that. So it's kind of like resetting, not to zero, but like resetting back somehow. And then the more I drew, like the style just happened organically over time. And I just kind of like draw like what made sense. And I found like the key, and this is like what I recommend to like my students when I teach, is like just like style is something like that happens naturally, and the way to get style is one, don't try to copy styles, try to like absorb all the styles you like, and 2 is draw from life, because like if you try and draw from life, like it brings out your like kind of natural style somehow. so yeah, so it's like once I stopped trying to have a style, it's like when my style kind of developed. And yeah, it's weird, like sometimes like comparing like stuff I draw now to 20 years ago. It's like it's different, but at the same time, it's like still feels very connected and like there's a clear progression.
I can't picture your stories being presented in any other way.
Yeah.
It really, they work, what you're saying and what you're drawing work so well together.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can you talk about like, where you teach and how teaching relates to your books?
Yes. So I teach at the School of Arts here in Chicago, which is where I got my MFA. I started out, someone as a painter named Krista Donner, and she couldn't teach one semester, and she taught a comics class, but it was a very like fine art school comics class. And I subbed for her that semester. And then after that, they asked me like if I wanted to come up with my own class. And so then,
How was that?
What's that?
When was that?
That was 2010, I think, was the first year I taught. So, so it was like 2011. I came up with a class that was kind of regimented, and the final project was everyone draws like a 12-page comic story. Like, so the first few, like 5 weeks is like exercises to kind of get them thinking about storytelling in comics form, and then they're like doing like 2 pages a week. There's still some exercises here and there within that, but that class was like took a lot of effort because it was very, very specific exercises and steps, and this like finished thing that like for a lot of them, like 12 pages is like a lot of comics. And like when I think about it, it's like, oh man, did I even do anything that's 12 pages long like through college? I don't know that I did. Like I have lots of 1.5 page things. So I came up with another class that I was like, well, I'll do the opposite. And this is the class that I still teach. I stopped teaching the other class, and it's every week is a different 1-week exercise. So they have, it's a studio class, so it's 9 to 4. And I give them, we critique projects the following week. So one thing I found is that everyone works at such vastly different paces, especially with comics. Some students like are finished by lunch, and some students like they're not quite done the next week when we look at it. But the class is all about process and trying new things and not worrying about that finished thing, and taking that pressure away and just goof around basically. So like one week might be something super general, like draw an abstract comic. Some weeks I have like more specific things. I'll do things like everyone writes like a little story, like a paragraph long story, passes it to the person next to them, and then that person draws it as a comic. Or I might like do some rules like, okay, everyone has to draw a comic, but there's no characters or text. So how do you tell a story with like just objects and setting, basically? Or I'll do collage. I'll bring in like stacks of old comics and like cut these up and make a new comic out of them. And so, yeah. And so the thing for me, like one of the reasons my teaching has been really helpful is I find that it's been really important in terms of analyzing my own work and like why something doesn't work. Or why, like, so those times when like something really bugs me, like being able to put your finger on it and like figure out like, well, why does this page feel wrong when I look at it? Like aside from like missing Nightcrawler's tail, but like in terms of like pacing for a story, like why doesn't that work? And so in teaching, I've got to like, I'm looking at a student's work and I say like, I have to be able to explain to them like, okay, so on your page, this is like, you've drawn this character here and you've placed this dialogue balloon here. And so this is why, like, when you're reading this, it feels funny because it's like, you're almost telling the reader to go down to this panel and you're skipping this panel. And so having to verbalize that just like has helped me stay aware in general of like just in comics making of how things are working and how compositions work and how storytelling works.
Is it an undergrad class or?
It's an undergrad class, so yeah. Like once in a while, there's like a graduate student might they have to like get special permission to take it, but yeah.
Did 2 more. Yeah.
Hi, are there any comic artists that you're currently reading that you're really excited about?
Oh, there's so many. But it's like one of those things, it's like, okay, I need to look at my bookshelf. So I'm trying to look at my bookshelf and it's like, I'll just go through like things that I've been reading lately. Anders Nilsson's Tongues. If you haven't seen that, that's great. Full disclosure, it's a friend who I've known for years. So, but just so amazing visually. I just read the Genevieve Castret collection from Hurley. So if you haven't read her comics, she unfortunately passed away before doing more, but her work's amazing. That collection is just amazing. So anything her one of my former students won the Ignatz for promising talent last fall. Although I cannot take credit for she came into class fully formed and I just got to watch. But her name's Caroline Cash and she's done a couple comics and her stuff is really fun and she's one of those people when I think about style, she has just had this instant style of comics. Who else? I don't know, there's lots. I need to seems like such an obvious question, but I need to look at my bookshelf and say.
We've got plenty of cool stuff in the bookstore, so questions if you want. Okay, maybe one more question and then we'll hang out and sign and.
You can also ask me questions when I'm signing.
We'll do 2. You didn't ask one yet. So.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask, just kind of piggybacking on hers, in no particular order, who are your top 5 comic writers of all time? Top 5 comic artists of all time?
Oh, jeez.
No particular order.
I don't know. That may be hard.
We can do 3. Top 3.
I mean, I also don't like saying top because there's Chris Ware, but he writes and draws. I really like. I'm just gonna name some random people, I guess. Grant Morrison as a writer, I really like, especially things like The Filth or Invisibles. And I like I was never a huge Superman fan. I like Superman, but it was hard for me to find Superman stories that I liked. But his All-Star Superman was I like that Superman story. Julie Doucet is another one. It's an all-time favorite who, very small amount of work that she made, but it's amazing. It was a big influence on me. In terms of mainstream superhero stuff, my favorite artists were John Romita Jr., Art Adams. Yeah. I guess I would need to add Chris Claremont as in terms of writers too, because X-Men was so big. Although now when I go back and read it, it's I don't know, I need to be in the right mindset, but it's there's a lot of words in these. How did I find time when I was a kid to read them? Oh man, so many words.
I asked Tom Orzechowski about that once because he was the letterer for all the. I said, "Did you get paid by the word?" He said, "No," but yeah, he loves the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, did you have one more?
Do you have a dream project?
Oh, I have a few dream projects, I guess. I mean, I would still love to do something with X-Men. And maybe someday that'll happen. Like, and whether it's like in the format of Thor and Loki or just in general, like, I still love drawing the X-Men. And I've done a lot of science fiction stuff, even aside from Star Wars. But the others, I always loved fantasy when I was growing up. And like, so I'd love to even just do like the Tolkien calendar one year. That would be cool. But I have like a fantasy adventure story that I started working on during the pandemic when I had another project get canceled and I had some time. It was like an idea in the back of my head. So that's kind of like a current dream project that I might get to soon. Yeah, there's probably some other things that I'm not thinking of right now, but like those are maybe the main ones. Like,
Excellent. Thanks so much. So we are having to sign right over there, and we've got as many books as we were able to get inside up front in the bookstore. And yeah, visit our website for more information on the upcoming auction, on exhibition calendar and everything else. But thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
thanks.